Hello.
Hello.
How you doing?
You need to swap the two sides we're on because my camera's over there and your camera's over there.
All right, hang on. Let add to stage. There we go. That looks
there
better.
We go.
Fantastic.
So you know Ant and Dec?
Yes.
So you know that's how you can tell which one's which, is they always stand the same way round. Not that I can remember which one's which.
I can't stand which way. I can't remember which way around they stand. I don't watch things which have Ant and Dec on them.
You never saw Biker Grove?
I watched Biker Grove back in the day. I remember one of them getting shot in both eyes at the same time with paintballs.
Thus demonstrating the double slit experiment and the wave particle duality of paintballs in Newcastle youth clubs in the 1990s.
All I remember is one of them shouting, "Why, I man, I gone blind." And
hello and welcome to us getting kicked off the internet within 30 seconds of our first ever stream.
Because of my terrible Geordie accent.
So I think we should point out for the benefit of viewers who are tuning in that I have had very, very few complaints ever in my entire career of doing things on stages. And 100% of them has been when me and you are doing something we haven't scripted. So we have all of that to look forward to.
Oh, yes. Yes. No. So, yeah, basically the idea is we do this, we live stream it, and then we can talk to people in the comments and all that sort of stuff as well. And then I'm going to take the recording, run it through some audio cleanup to get rid of all the clicks and hisses and background noise, and maybe do a bit of editing.
So this is the first time I've ever used StreamYard. Like I've done events on StreamYard where somebody else is producing it and everything.
Yes.
This was one of the big revelations. So, like in 2020, suddenly they're like, we can't do anything in person anymore. So you're going to have to do all your events online, like from now on. And so I was like, well, I guess we all need to figure this stuff out for ourselves. So we had a thing where we were running like little Zoom meetups and stuff, kind of every lunchtime to figure it all out. And then like when hybrid events came back and you started actually being able to talk to human beings properly, I discovered they're all using video producers. Like they have humans.
Yes.
Like they're employing people to click the buttons for them. And everyone, I was like, well, that explains why none of you look as burned out and exhausted as I do from not leaving the house for a year.
That's the dream.
So yeah, I've got all the buttons. I'm going to click them and see what they do. What if I click that? Oh, look at that.
That's a zoom in.
That's a face enlarging. Wow.
We've got a thing so I can share a screen and I can choose I'm going to choose that entire screen.
I'm going to change my name because you've got an at in yours and it looks really cool. So I'm going to do that.
Yeah, and there you go. We have this sort of over and under view
business
where
plan.
we can. Yes, I have a business. This is my business plan. But yes, but no. So I mean, actually, the main reason that we're doing this at all is that I was invited to do VS Toolbox Live, and they use this.
Yeah.
And while we were doing it, I was just kind of like, me and Dylan should just get an account on here and just talk crap and call it a podcast.
I mean, I was looking around the other day and thinking what the world really needs is more unscripted like podcasts by white guys just talking to each other about computers, because there aren't. And like, there's a gap in the market.
There's definitely there's a gap in the market for it being quite so us.
This is true. There is definitely a gap in the market for Dylan Beatty and Mark Rendell doing an unscripted YouTube thing once a week.
Yes.
There's nobody else in that space. This is one of those situations. So, look, we got people in the chat. Is this one of those situations where not the name of the podcast is going to end up as the name of the podcast?
No. No, but if people have ideas for the name of the podcast, then stick them in the chat, because I'm utterly clueless.
So, podcast, I discovered this researching a talk that I put together a while ago. Podcasting is a wonderful example of a technology that was invented by users rather than by like any company or anything. And it went mainstream for about 18 months before anyone gave it a name. So there used to be, so for the youngsters out there, for the folks on the stream who understand Instagram and TikTok, there used to be a thing called RSS feeds, which was a way that you could write your blog, because we didn't have social media back in 2001 when the Space Odyssey happened. So you'd post stuff on your blog, and then if you wanted to read all your friends' blogs, they would publish RSS, which was like an XML syndication format with all your blog posts and articles. And this was kind of a thing, and everyone did it, and it was lovely, and it was how we all published on our own platforms, and then people could see it and comment on it. And then somebody else figured out that you could put, instead of like your RSS feed linking to a web page, it could link to anything, which could be an MP3 file that was up on your web server.
Yeah.
You could record like this, half an hour of chat or whatever, and MP3 it and stick it on a server and put it in the feed. And then someone wrote a script that you could run that when you left your iPod plugged in overnight to charge up, it would also download any of the MP3s. And this was all beautifully kind of hacked together out of stuff that already worked. So MP3s were a standard and RSS was a standard, and iPod had sort of dominated it. It had turned MP3 into a mainstream format that people, because I remember the Diamond Rio but normal people didn't care. Because why would you spend $300 on something which could hold 30 minutes of music? But
yes, when you could spend $300 on something that would hold, I can't remember what was the capacity of the first iPod. Hang on, I'm gonna Google
5
that.
gigs, I think.
5 gigs.
Yeah. I never had one, but I have dismantled a few, and I'm pretty sure there was a 5 gig Hitachi hard drive in there.
Yeah, and it was a spinny hard drive, of course, wasn't it?
Yes, because they'd worked out how to make spinny hard drives that could detect when they were being dropped and
Yes.
park the heads before they hit the ground.
Yeah, there was a 5 gig and a 10 gig version, which was 1,000 to 2,000 songs, and it had a 10-hour battery life.
Yeah, they were cool. They were fun thing. Anyway, so yeah,
and then I remember, back in the day, when I've lost my StreamYard page. There we go. There it is. I used the wrong thing. So many monitors, and I decided to put everything on the big one. But no, because I remember hard disks. I remember when you had to park your hard disks back in the days of 5 1/4-inch full height SCSI drives, and if you forgot to give it the park command or to shut your operating system down properly, and then you moved the computer, the disk heads would just wibble around over the surface
and
and
make holes in things
and
that
make
were
holes
not
in
supposed to have
your
holes in
data.
them.
And yeah, it was great fun.
Have you ever taken a mechanical hard drive apart?
I have.
The disk platters are the shiniest things that have ever been made.
They are.
Like I remember we were dismantling a load for we had a bunch of hard drives we had to kind of securely dispose of, and somebody was like, "Oh, well, there's this company that does for like $100 a disc or £100 a disc." Well, that's a lot of money to and they burned it with thermite or something. But then we're like, we could just take them apart, and we'll make funny robots out of the magnets. And I remember on a sunny day, we were this was my office had a balcony in Soho, and we had the disc platters, and we were seeing what's the furthest building we could shine a sunspot onto using a hard drive platter. And it was like halfway across central London. You could get a ridiculous amount of range off these things.
Yeah.
So because they're so flat and so shiny and so unbelievably smooth. So and yeah, then we got fingerprints all over them, and after that, that's probably then completely unreadable forever. So
yes, or you send it off to one of those places. But but no, I meant to say. So yes, I've done 2 VS Toolbox lives in like the last 6 weeks, both about gRPC. And the first one was absolutely fine, and I was all ready for it, and I was sort of online 1/4 of an hour before it started. And I had Visual Studio open with the sample code. And then this one that happened this week that I did, I completely forgot about it because I'm off work this week. And so I'm not sitting at my computer and getting my notifications popping up and saying, hey, you're doing a thing. And so at 5 minutes to 7, I think it was, I got this email from Robert saying, are you on your way to StreamYard? And I'm just kind of like, ah! And so I charge up here and I just open up the sample code in JetBrains Rider. And so I did the entire hour live stream on Visual Studio Toolbox Live using JetBrains Rider. And so I'm basically going to see if JetBrains will give me some money for doing that, because they really should. That's the second person.
Oh, hey, Renee!
Statler and Waldorf to talk about IT.
I blame you for this entirely because your Twitter picture is one of them.
Well, it was for a very long time.
A lot like Ant and Dec. I don't know which one's which, but they're probably always the same way around because the puppets probably don't swap. So
the one that I used on Twitter was Statler. Which means you would be the shorter, rounder one.
Which is the same when Ian Cooper posted a picture of Peter Cook and Dudley Moore.
Yes.
In response to the Twitter thing, and said, this is what it's going to be like. I was like, I'm going to be Dudley Moore, aren't I?
Only
From that pairing,
that I would probably swear more than you.
Well, you're older than me and swearier, so
yes. And I am not the editor of Private Eye, unfortunately.
William
yeah, so
fancies an upcycled mirror made out of disc spindles. Yeah, they actually look quite, because once you take them out, they are literally just shiny discs.
very, very shiny
Unless you know
discs.
what you're looking at, you have no idea that this is a sort of digital storage platter at all.
Yes.
So yeah, do it. Find an old hard drive, and then go on Amazon and order the special tool you need with the tiny little T6 like hex wrench star head that you
Or
need to take the thing
get
apart.
the iFixit set.
Oh yeah, that'll work.
I'm going to keep sort of calling out brands just to see if we can get anyone to sponsor this idiocy. But yes, no, you can. It's interesting taking, especially old tech. If you can get a 5¼ inch hard disk from the 80s, then obviously everything's bigger. There are people like on Etsy who you can send them any piece of technology, and they'll take it apart, and then they will mount it on like a lovely dark green background in a frame, and then put glass over it, and they will send it back to you, and you can hang it on your wall.
That sounds like fun.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's not cheap, and you need to sacrifice whatever the device is.
You know that thing that some developers have, where when somebody mentions like a new technology or a system, just something you didn't know about, it's almost like Tourette's. You immediately think, I know how to break that.
Yes.
You think, I am going to destruction test the poor people on Etsy by sending them a Hayes micro modem, the ones where they poured epoxy resin over all the chips so that you couldn't take them apart to see which off-the-shelf components were used to make them. And I'm like, why do I have that voice in my brain? Like, this sounds like lovely people doing beautiful creative art to commemorate wonderful, deprecated or old hardware. I'm just like, yeah, send them a modem covered in epoxy resin.
Yes. I think that's what they call intrusive thoughts, isn't it? It's like when you see somebody just standing entirely alone on the edge of a cliff, and you just go, I could push you. I'm not going to. I would never do that, but I could. It's a thing that could happen. So we've got a couple of suggestions for names in the chat here. We've got Podcrast. I'm just moving on from my urge to murder people.
Step away from the cliff.
Yes. So we got Podcrastinate, that's quite good. The Clueless, which is just rude, frankly.
Well, do you
Christopher.
have clues? I don't have clues.
I've got clues. I have a list actually here in Obsidian of things that we could talk about. Because if we are going to talk about tech, because like you're just back from, yes, I know the mic arm is covering up my face. Eagle, thank you. And I will sort it out for the next time. I think I can mount this Rode microphone arm upside down on the thing where it is. And then
I have a boom that comes down off. I got to show. Here, let me switch cameras, and you can get the reality view, and you can see the beautifully elegant minimalist workspace that I'm streaming. Can I do that? Let me click on settings is probably a good thing, and camera. And if I go for that one, there we go. But now this one's movable because it's not mounted to anything. And so if I pull the wrong cable here, by the way, I'm going to go completely dark. So you can see the whole setup here. And so you can see, and I've got this shelf, and the shelf then has a boom stand on it, which has one of these mics on it. And so that's kind of and that you can move it up so it's just out of shot, and then adjust it, and so you don't get the thing.
That's quite cunning. I might try that. One nitpicking comment, I think Rendell's audio video is slightly out of sync. Yeah, I think it might be.
That happens in real life.
It does. Definitely happens when I'm playing bass.
Mark is simultaneously 30 seconds ahead and 10 years behind the rest of the human race.
Yes.
When it comes to things like music and gadgets and technology. Yes. Constantly solving problems no one else has thought of yet, while also listening to music that even your dad doesn't think is cool anymore. So I like Pink Floyd. and I can nearly play Money. Which is a super difficult bass line. Because there's a lovely story about recording Money by Pink Floyd, where because Roger Waters wrote it, and it's got that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
And they wrote that, and they wrote the verses for that, and they got Dick Parry in and said, Dick, you got to play the saxophone in 7/4 on this. And then they got Dave Gilmour to come in for his guitar solo, and he went 7/4, no, bugger off,
No.
and just switched to 4/4 for the guitar solo, and then back into 7 for the ending.
No, the tab on Songster is an absolute mess.
Yeah.
And 7/4. I mean, why is that even a time signature? That's just mad.
Well, you got. I mean, time signatures are lovely. The best one for this, if you want to kind of melt the bit of your brain that goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, is "Turn It On Again" by Genesis.
Okay.
Which apparently they did a reunion in the 80s after Phil Collins had gone from, because when Genesis started, Peter Gabriel was the singer.
Yeah.
And then he quit to go and do all his solo albums, and which are awesome, and his solo stuff's great. And Genesis they kept auditioning singers, and Phil Collins was kind of showing them how to sing the songs. Eventually they just went, Phil, you just sing it. And so he was singing and drumming, and then when they did a Nebworth reunion, they said, well, Phil's going to sing the new song, so Peter can drum them. And he's like, I'm Peter Gabriel, of course I can play the drums. And he said that "Turn It On Again" was like, this is a song in 13. You never know when the beat's going to land. And it's a wonderful example of something that's melodically really catchy, but structurally so complicated, you kind of don't know where to go. Yeah. It's fantastic and weird. Okay. Jeffrey says, maybe you're dubbed.
Maybe I am dubbed.
Maybe you are dubbed.
I'm actually speaking some weird language entirely of my own devising.
There's that new AI machine learning. I hate the fact that AI has just kind of, the term artificial intelligence now refers to large language models and computer vision models. Because when we make something actually intelligent, we are going to have no idea what to call it now. But
Steve.
Steve. Hello, we've invented Steve. Can we have your venture capital, please?
Yes. Yeah.
There's one out there where you give it video and it translates your speech into a language that you don't speak, but it also kind of lip syncs up your mouth and everything.
It sort of deep fakes your lip movement.
Yeah, and that's just weird. And what I want to do with that is I'm really curious to see if I record myself speaking French and tell it to turn it back into English. You'll get something which is, I think, real uncanny valley. I haven't had the time to try it out yet. I've been too busy to do stupid things.
So I have a new webcam, by the way. Because I'm about to start recording a course for Dome Train on highperformance.net and C# and spans and all that sort of stuff. And I thought I could use my SLR. I've got a Canon EOS 200D. Doesn't do clean HDMI output.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, can I get like a cheap SLR that will do clean HDMI output? And the cheapest I could find was 700 quid. And this webcam was 320 quid. It's the Insta360 Link. And actually the image quality, and you've got sort of white balance tweaking and everything. And so I think it's plenty good enough for me being in the corner of a screen full of code. But
hello,
it does
Surly
this.
Dev. Surly Dev is here. Surly Dev being one of the people I know on the internet.
It follows me around. It's completely brilliant.
That's really strange.
And it is actually
is that mechanical or is that just optical?
It's mechanical. It's on a gimbal and it's automatically following me around. And then when it's not active, it just points itself downwards. So the privacy thing. But no, it's completely, and also because it comes with all this technology and the big 1/2-inch sensor and all this sort of stuff. And I expected it to be enormous, but it's like it's that big. But no, it's tiny. The base is quite big, which I assume is where all the gubbins is.
Yeah.
But the rest of it is tiny. So yes. So you've just been in Porto.
Renee says, I have. Renee says there's a Canon webcam utility. Eagle likes the sound from your mic better than mine. It's better. Okay, well, we can do an A/B test on that. I can put my mic here. And now I sound really good. Like, there we go, the audio quality. But there's a problem, as you can probably tell. So And it's the thing where you're like people talking about, and it's like, I know that half of you are going to be watching this like on a train on a crappy pair of Bluetooth earphones that you bought for £5 in a convenience store. I was watching a movie on the plane coming home yesterday. I was watching Mad Max Fury Road, which, because
Oh,
so
good
much of it,
movie.
like if you want to take the MP4, the H.264 encoding system for video, and demonstrate why it is hot garbage, use it to show a truck blowing up in the middle of a dust storm. Because you
Yeah.
just get a screen full of tiles. It looks
Yes.
like an 8-bit computer game.
It's
And
like a close-up of 12 pixels of a JPEG.
yeah. And we have all these, and I was thinking, when George Miller made this movie, if someone had sat him down and went, George, this is the viewing experience for the people going to be watching your film, he'd probably have cried.
Yes. I mean, because there's newer ones now. Is AV1? Is that the sort of fancy, the latest and patent free?
I've fortunately reached the point as a human being where the age-related deterioration of my eyesight and my hearing is such that I don't care about new codecs anymore because they have nothing to offer me.
Well, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
until they can tap it directly into the nerves and get all the missing resolution back. Yeah.
I do think it's brilliant that the bandwidth required, the network sort of load for a 1080p or a 4K stream now is about 10% of the size of what it was when YouTube first started.
Yeah.
And when YouTube first started, we all had 512 megabit ADSL,
Yeah.
and now I've got like a gigabit down.
Kilobit. We had 512 kilobit ADSL.
Kilobit, that is
Yeah.
right. Yes.
I don't have 512 megabit yet. I might be getting it at the end of the month, depending how fast it is after they drill the hole and put the new fiber in and everything.
Yes.
So that'll be exciting.
Yeah. So shout out in the chat if you remember 9600 baud dial-up modems.
So one of the amazing things about domestic broadband that it never occurred to me until I did some digging into this for a talk that I wrote, is the reason why it got faster was just that we got better signal processing chips. Because the wires never changed. There was fiber, and then when they roll out DSL, it's like, well, we'll roll fiber to the cabinet, or high bandwidth to the cabinet, but we are still using 4 copper telephone wires that were probably installed in 1972 to actually get the internet into your house. And the best signal they could get out of that with the state of the art in signal processing in 2002 was about mine was 576, I think.
Right.
And then they're like, oh no, now we got 2 megabit. Now we've got 8 megabit. Now I've got about 45 megabit, still on a 1970s telephone wire.
Yes.
And not because the wire has got any better, but because the quality of the signal processing has got, and to think that you can go from 576K to 45 megabits over the same piece of wire just by building better chips, it's mind-blowing. It really is.
I can't even begin to imagine how clever the people designing and making those chips are. I see sort of C++ code that confuses me, and they're just doing ridiculous things with electrons moving through copper and everything else.
I mean, I love the whole, you start chipping away the layers of abstraction, and you got you got folks out there who are using Eagle says, don't you guys have fiber in your house in the UK now? I will have at the end of the month. They've only just rolled it out in the street where I live. Which is going to be exciting, because then I'll have gigabit internet in my house.
Yes.
And I don't know why I need gigabit internet in my house, but I want it. So
downloading Windows updates faster.
Actually,
that's throttled at Microsoft's end. So
the main reason to do it is so that Dropbox will sync from one laptop to the other at gigabit speed, because it has a thing called Dropbox LAN sync, but I don't believe it. I'm sure that doesn't do what it claims it's going to be doing.
No, I don't think it does. But no, somebody in the chat mentioned your new business cards, and I'm just going to stick those up on the screen because they are here and they are awesome.
I have one. So the first batch that I ordered 2 batches from 2 different suppliers, one in Europe and the other one in the US. And the first batch came through with the little smiley face on. Let me get the focus on that. Oh, there we go. But the back came out blank because they didn't print the
Oh,
dylanbeatty.net on it. So I have about 50 of these now, which are just like completely pointless narcissism in plastic form. Because it's like, oh look, it's just a face. Like, but yeah, the other ones, these arrived from Daddario, and they
oh
shipped
wow.
me a tiny envelope in a massive box by
Yes,
UPS.
because of
So
course they did.
yeah, well, I think UPS didn't want to touch the envelope. UPS are like, no, you got to put it in a box, or we're not going to
Yeah.
put it across the Atlantic because our Atlantic crossing system is box based. Oh, I
Yes,
don't
and if
know.
it's not at least 60 by 30, then we'll lose it.
Yeah, which is probably like I like the fact the box can't fall down the back of anything. Like, it's the
Yeah,
kind of thing you're gonna notice. So,
or
but yeah, no.
through
So,
your letterbox.
and one, I thought this is a nice thing when you're chatting to people, and here you go, have this. That's my web address, and you can look it up. But also their guitar picks, which I go
Hmm,
through at a fair old clip. And if you're going to order them in bulk, it doesn't actually cost any more to get them custom printed. So,
yes.
so those are fun.
I'm currently trying to figure out playing with a pick, because bass you sort of start out finger style, and then people say, "Oh, you should use a pick for that
Mm,
song," like "Smells Like Teen Spirit," for example.
yeah.
Um, and I see people on like Reddit and chat rooms and things going, "Oh, I play with it, finger styles really hard," and I'm
Mm,
kind of like, "No, using a pick
yeah.
is hard. You're going to have to give me some lessons or something." Oh, so we have a discussion
A
topic.
discussion topic.
Apparently, we are both excellent speakers. Brackets
Thank you.
conference close
That's
brackets.
nice.
Thank you very much, Eagle. That's nice to say. Would love to hear a discussion on your approach method for creating a new session. Well, okay, we can talk about that,
We absolutely can.
because you just got back
Um,
from NDC Porto,
I did.
where
And
you were doing.
so I did. So I have a couple of new talks every year, and the thing about this, which is fascinating to me, is how people who do terrible talks, they're kind of all the same. Like talks that suck, they suck for the same reason. It's people who they don't know what they want to say. They stand and read. There's too much text on their slides. They stand there and read it. There is a very definite formula for how to write a terrible presentation. And I think that you can learn this at business school. And I think there is a wizard in PowerPoint that helps you do it. But the people who are really good, they do it completely differently. Like one little detail that I noticed recently, when I do a presentation, I will duplicate the slide deck. So I'll take the PowerPoint file and I'll copy and paste and I'll rename it to the name of the event. And then I'll go through and I'll make all the adjustments if it needs to be a little bit shorter, or I want to fit in some local references or something new has happened. So I have these, and I have probably 20 or 30 talks that I can deliver if someone asks me to. So all of those are kind of ready to go. And I saw Vitaly Friedman, who one of the founders of Smashing Magazine, who's been doing web
Yeah.
stuff for years. Vitaly has every slide he has ever used in one massive deck. So he has a PowerPoint deck with 1,250 slides in it that he just jumps around for the bits that he wants to talk about today. And he did this
Okay.
amazing session at Tweakers, really, really good. And that approach is so diametrically opposite the way I approach doing the stuff that I do. But clearly, I've kind of found a thing that works for me, and he's got a thing that works for him. And you talk to others. So Kevlin Henney, I know he doesn't know what order he's going to talk in, and you watch him closely. He's very good at just kind of casually walking past the lectern and just tapping a button, and is actually going, I want that slide next, and kind of
Yeah.
going with the flow and mixing things up. And so mine, what I tend to do with mine is it's Niall. Hello, Niall. No,
Niall.
we were just talking about people who make terrible PowerPoint presentations, mate. I'm sure
Yeah.
that. So for those of you who don't know Niall is a dear friend of ours who
Yes.
we lives in Norway and is a regular on the whole NDC conferences circuit.
Yes.
And
Lives in
good to see
Norway,
you,
but
dude.
is
Welcome.
very Irish.
Yes.
Very Irish. But
Um,
The
So
worst
no,
part of
I
presenting. Yeah.
something I do a lot of people think is weird is I write my talks. Like I sit down and I open a new Evernote file and I sit and I write and I write and I write. And when you know how fast you talk, you can kind of work backwards to how much material do you need. And so for me, a 1 hour talk is between 10,000 and 12,000 words. And people, when you tell them that, like people who do academic writing or people who write for money are like, you write how much? And you're like, yeah. And they're like, but that's loads. And it's like,
Yeah.
yes, it
'Cause I
is.
talk fast.
Yeah. But then, and the thing about that is that, the thing in software where like, if you find the bug while you're still writing the code, the cost of fixing is like 1. And if you find it after you've deployed to your integration environment, it's 10. And if you find it during a deployment, it's 100. And if a customer finds the bug and reports it to you, the cost of fixing is 1,000. And it's the same with talks. When it is just a text file, it's really easy to edit and move things around and figure out what works and what doesn't. Once you've got a PowerPoint and you've got slides in there, kind of the cost of making any change is you have to really think, okay, well, if this moves there, what's that going to do to the flow and the narrative and the links and everything?
Yeah.
So I start with words, and the rule I have is 3 months before the event, I want to know where I'm going to be and what I'm talking about. 3 weeks before it, I want the transcript written. 3 days before it, the slides are finished. And 3 hours before it, I want to be in the right building and know where the room is and what's going to happen when I plug stuff in. So that's my rule of threes. What about you? How do you do yours?
Completely differently from that. So like my current keynote locknote thing that I'm doing, which is how JavaScript happened, which goes from Fortran all the way to JavaScript and shows where various different things like using I for iteration and for loops and ifs and all that's where were they first invented. And I read 5 or 6 books, including one just about the creation of Fortran. And then I make slides. And I have one slide for each thing that I want to talk about. And that is my kind of notes, effectively.
Yeah.
And they normally have like 2 or 3 words and a photo or something on the slide. And then I get up on stage and I start talking.
So Eagle just asked in the chat, how much do you make up on the spot versus how much is scripted and rehearsed?
Yes.
And
So yeah, for me,
go for it.
it's almost entirely made up on the spot the first time I do it. And I will always get to about 5 or 10 minutes left and still have half the presentation left to do the first time I do it. Then when NDC or whatever upload it to YouTube, I watch it and I kind of go, well, that was blather and that was waffle, and I can cut that and I can cut that. And then the second time I do it, it's still essentially made up on the spot, but I've got a better idea of the timing. But if I say something that gets a big laugh, then the next time I do the talk, I will say that again. It and so it evolves over time. And so if you see a talk that I've done 10 times, like the worst programming language ever, which I've done like probably a couple of dozen times now, and it's much more polished, and the jokes are the jokes and they're in there. But yeah, it's completely made up. I have tried writing a script and I can't. My brain doesn't work that way. I have enormous respect for people who can. I know you do. I know like Scott Hanselman does. You can tell watching Scott give a talk that it's been so precisely planned and scripted.
The funny thing about that with Scott that I noticed is that you don't notice that until you see him give the same talk twice.
Yeah,
because he comes across it's beautifully kind of relaxed and engaging, and he looks like he's just I'll use a notepad window, and then you see it again, you're like, you've figured out every detail, not only of how to do this, but how to make it look really kind of cool and relaxed and slick. And I've seen him. I think the nice thing about that is that it means that he If someone asks a question, I've seen him kind of go off and do little kind of live demos and type things in. And because of the way that he uses the tools to present, he's got all these bits and pieces that give him the scope to kind of go off script a little bit, which I quite like. So Niall says he spends about an hour for each minute of content, which I think that's probably fair. I mean, I try to, so before one of mine makes it to something like, NDC or build stuff, I will always I'll have done one myself just to camera to watch back, and then I'll have done one at a user group somewhere, because that's the kind of false deadline. That means that I pull my finger out and actually have to get the thing finished.
I should do that.
Yeah, I mean, I something that I have done occasionally and always regretted doing is turning up somewhere with a bit of preparation left to do, and I know I have the time to do it. But then I was in Tel Aviv in Israel about sort of 6-7 years ago, and the day off that I was going to go and see all the things, actually I was stuck doing final preparation for the session I was giving, and that was like, this was stupid. I should have finished this earlier at home so that I had today to actually go and see some stuff.
Well, because we were in Copenhagen for the Developers Festival, and you had massively overcommitted to do things.
Yes.
And every single one of them was kind of like right down to the wire in having the things ready for it. And
well, I like the wire.
You were not a happy bear.
The problem is I find the wire massively stimulating.
Yes.
Like I've learned that I have better ideas the night before a talk than I will ever have the week or the month before. And that one, I had 2 weeks in August blocked out to prepare all the material for Copenhagen, and I just got whatever the nerd equivalent of writer's block is. I sat down every day with the laptop, nothing in the schedule, nothing to do, and you just stare at the blank screen until you hate yourself and you want to put your fist through it and throw it out the window. And just send an email to everyone associated with the event going, I've decided I hate you all and I want you to be dead, and I'm never doing this ever again. And it's stupid, because it's just trying to force your brain to engage in a way that right now brain does not want to.
Yes.
And
go and do something else and come back.
Yeah. And then, you get to a point where like, no, I actually have to do. And of course, once at that point, there's something about the pressure. And, this something I know for a fact about me is that a scheduled event with a live audience makes me believe in the deadline in a way that no boss I have ever had could do. Because I'm like, well, I know you said Friday, but actually, if it's not Friday, everyone knows we can do it on Monday and nothing bad's going to happen. You just might not get your bonus. Bobbins. But it's like, if you do this on Friday, all the people who are here are going to see it. And if you do it on Monday, they'll all have gone home and the whole thing was a total waste of time. Yes. And so this is why I find do a user group the month before or something, because then you have the real commitment with the real audience who actually want to see what you're going to do. And, the first draft will often be, Eagle says in the talk that scripts out every word and ends up with 65 minutes. Most of my talks start out as 90 minutes. Like the first, when I write it, I will go over by like 50%, and then I'll go through and I'll edit chunks out. And it's difficult because often I edit out stuff that, I really liked and I want to keep it. I have a talk about typography and HTML. It's called From Hot Metal to HTML. It's the history of print and typesetting and how digital technology has kind of got in and revolutionized that. And the thing which started that talk was I was building a website for a client who sent me their house font to use. And so it had like the WAF, the web font versions and everything. And there's a bug in the font. The hinting metrics, the font is not centered inside its own box. And, you think people take fonts for granted. They're like, you pick a font and it just works or it doesn't work. But actually, fonts can have really, really weird bugs. And this thing, there was too much right and too much bottom padding. So every character was in a box that was bigger than it needed to be. And so if you put it on a button, the button didn't line up properly. And if you used it in a heading, the heading didn't line up properly. And, I spent about 2 or 3 days going, all right, CSS, so first it was, can I fix this using CSS rules by hand? Then it was like, can I create like a Sass mixin? And I was like, you know what? How do I actually fix this? And so I figured out, how do you dismantle a font and open it up and find the settings? And believe it or not, the setting that web browsers use so WOF, the web open font format, is this kind of weird mishmash of different conventions that came from different operating systems. So bits of it are from TrueType
Yeah.
and bits of it are Adobe Type 1. But the font hinting metric, and I discovered this by trial and error. I couldn't find it documented anywhere. So I was just changing numbers and refreshing the page. OS2 Warp,
That's how I code everything.
the hinting information that your browser uses to decide how much space to leave around like a capital letter H is a number that is in the font file for use with OS2 Warp. And you're like, you think about an operating system you thought was just history and left no trace whatsoever. Nope,
Yes.
it's there. Every time your browser uses a bespoke font, one of the numbers was the OS2 Warp team worked on it. And so this was the whole story about the time I had to hack a font to fix a bug. And by the time I'd finished writing the talk, that was the least interesting thing in it. And so it had to go. And, it's...
we need to do like a sort of free weekend conference.
Yeah.
Which is just, the talk takes as long as it takes, and people can listen for as long as they want to listen for, and then they can go into a different room and see somebody else talk about something else. That would be fun.
Yeah.
So Niles asked about how easy lightning talks and PubConf talks are, and that reminded me of the movie themed PubConf, where you did a talk based on Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that one.
I was staggered when I watched you do that, because I saw you do it twice, I think, maybe 3 times. And you were just talking. You were saying the things. And the thing with PubConf, if you don't know what PubConf is, it happens usually after NDCs, but it's a guy called Todd Gardner who started it with Jacob Bradford from NDC. And it happens after conferences, and some of the speakers and some of the attendees and anyone who buys a ticket goes to a pub, and we do 5-minute talks, and there are 20 slides, and each slide auto progresses after 15 seconds, in theory. And you talk, and you're supposed to be funny. And it's not videoed, although one of mine was videoed and is actually up on YouTube. But generally it's not videoed, you're not allowed to tweet anything, and so you get speakers saying things that they wouldn't necessarily say. And every time Dylan does one of these, it is just so insanely good and polished and perfect. And you've obviously sort of scripted it very carefully, done the slides. Yes, Lemon does cheat on his slides. He puts the countdown on.
One of the reasons, actually, that comment there about countdowns on the slides, one of the reasons why I prefer using video than slides is exactly that. You don't know exactly when the 15-second is going to... Because I've done the same thing. When I did it with slides, I had a timer on the slide, so I knew when the transition was going to happen. And it makes for a better presentation, and it makes it a little bit easier as a presenter, because getting that kind of timing, because the difference between something being funny and something being really funny is whether the punchline and the visual kind of match perfectly.
Yeah, because they have to.
Yeah,
for maximum impact. Whereas my PubConf talks are slightly chaotic, and actually the thing that I'm really good at when it comes to PubConf is the improvise over these slides that you've never seen before about a subject that Todd's just made up.
Yes, you are ridiculously good at that.
Yes, I am annoyingly good at it, and everybody hates me, because it used to be that there would be the round of about 8 people who had prepared something very carefully, and then there was a vote, and the 3 best people would go through to the final, which was improv, which I would then win. And there was this whole thing about people just want to beat me at PubConf. And the only time recently that
people really wanted to beat you at PubConf.
Yes, so a couple of people. I think I've still won more than anybody else, which is obviously important to me because I don't have many achievements in my life.
But we'll never forget that one, right?
But yes, the actual prepared talks that I do, there is more prep. I do more prep for those. I wrote a song for one of them. for the Full Metal Hackett
I remember that
movie
one. That
themed
was
one.
good. Yeah.
People asked me for the lyrics to that song, and I'm just going, I'm not sending you the lyrics to that song. I don't think they were ever written down. But yes, but no PubConf. So, okay. More questions. Are your approaches significantly different between technical demonstrator talks, so like where you've got code and things on the screen, I suppose, versus philosophical, historical, freeform talks? And now Niall saying sing it. Okay, so what I can remember, I can remember the first verse. So the movie theme was Full Metal Jacket. And I did a call and response thing, and I wasn't sure first time I did it whether people were going to join in, and they did, and I had the entire pub shouting these back at me, and it went, I don't know, but I've been told
I don't know, but I've been told.
Uncle Bob's just beeping old.
And it proceeds in this vein.
And yes, he says AXO code should be clean. We don't know what that beep means. So yeah.
I have a T-shirt. So one of my side hustles at the moment is the Line Breakers merch store,
Yes.
which I'm looking at a bunch of sites that do, that you upload your designs and then people
Hmm.
can buy T-shirts, and I have a design for a T-shirt that says in massive letters, "Tone is like code. It's better when it's dirty."
Yes.
Which...
Yeah. But so Spreadshirt or Redbubble,
yeah,
are the two that I've used. I usually use Spreadshirt. My QR code T-shirt was Spreadshirt.
yeah.
I love
No,
my
I've
QR
had
code
a lot of
T-shirt.
good stuff with Spreadshirt.
Yes.
So,
But yes.
Anyway, go back to Eagle's question.
Eagle's question. So yes,
yeah.
right. So yeah, okay. So if I'm doing a talk where I've got code, then what I normally have is for each sort of thing that I want to demonstrate, or for each sort of increment as I introduce a new concept, I just have a sort of a section header slide on PowerPoint, and then the next slide says demo, and then I switch to the code, and so that is more structured, and the code has all been written in advance, even if it looks like I'm live coding it, which I don't do so much anymore. I tend to just uncomment things at the sort of extreme. But yes, that's more structured and more planned, simply because all the code has already been written. Funnily enough, Worst Programming Language was kind of more structured like that, because I was introducing terrible features into the programming language and adding that, and so they were appearing on screen a bit at a time, although in that case all the code was obviously in PowerPoint, because VS Code syntax highlighting doesn't support BS.
How dare they?
I know.
That sounds like a massive crashing oversight.
I should write a TextMate parser for it. But yeah, when you're doing a sort of a demonstration talk, this is how this works and so forth. You kind of have this thing where, okay, we'll introduce the fundamental concept, and then we'll build on it, and we'll add new things, and we'll take it through until we've covered everything. And yeah,
Actually, I just want to get something up so I can show you a screen share. I just need to find the folder. So I did a presentation last year about building ray tracers in JavaScript, which is that it? There we go.
Oh yes. Did you use, was that Pragprog book?
No.
Oh, okay. There's a Pragprog book where you build.
No, I figured it out with maths.
But you know maths.
I do know maths, it's true, although I still don't entirely get eigenvectors, which is why my ray tracer doesn't support geometric transformations yet. But
yes, the most complex maths I actually understand, I understand through a combination of one of your talks, The Art of Code, and a Jonathan Coulton song called Mandelbrot Set. And so I understand the Mandelbrot set. You take a point called Z in the complex plane and let Z1 be Z squared plus Z, and Z is Z2 is Z1 squared plus Z. And if it stays close to 0, then it's in the Mandelbrot set. But if it diverges off, then it's that. But I don't understand imaginary numbers, which is what the
Oh no,
complex plane is made
you
of.
don't have to understand them. You just have to accept that they will work whether you understand them or not.
Well, yes,
Um,
yes, and you can
so,
multiply them and do things with them.
so
But
this
no,
was a
my
talk
idea
I
of a
did
complex
about,
plane is
yeah,
the Eurofighter Typhoon. But dumb.
that is very funny. Yes,
I thought so.
yes. Um, and yeah, so this you're talking about coding talks. So exactly what Eagle has just said. I like to have code in PowerPoint and animate the code so it shows up a little at a time. And I put a huge amount of work into getting transition animation so I could show you like a block of code. I'm trying to find a slide here that will do this if I present it, which of course is going to present on the wrong screen. So let me flip that across and move that over there and move that over there and then switch that back
There we go.
again. And so this is a slide animation. So I'm like, okay, so in this, to get this feature, to get reflection, we need to take out the scene background, and then we need to add this, we need to add that, we need to add that, we need to add that, and we plug these lines in. And so literally this is all PowerPoint, but it's syntax highlighted and it's all copied in from VS Code.
Yeah.
So that I could draw attention to the piece of the ray tracer that I wanted people to pay attention to. So little things like this. Massive amount of effort, like probably more work than I've ever put into preparing a presentation. And I did it, and afterwards everyone went, that was really good, but it wasn't a Dylan talk. Like, where were the stories? And I was like, all right, we found the level. No more coding talks for me. Because I do workshops as well. So if you really want to see me show you how to do something with code, it takes a day or 2 days. I don't really kind of, because the talks that are very kind of heavy on code, they have a short shelf life. Because the closer you get to implementation detail of something which is currently important, let me switch the screen share off. Do I just remove that? There we go. Boom.
Yeah.
Yeah, the closer you get to an implementation detail of a current technology, the greater the likelihood that 3 months, 6 months from now, it will have changed. Which means if you're live demoing it and it's stuff that you actively maintain, yeah, that's brilliant. And I've seen, some fantastic presenters who they have the projects thing ready to go and they just kind of show you. And so when .NET 8 comes out, they can go from .NET 8, whatever preview it's on now, to .NET 8 release candidate to .NET 8 final. And they're just like, all right, run the test. And if anything fails, it means they changed it. We fixed that. We're good to go.
Yeah.
But, and that, I think people who are the people you go to, people like Philip Etberg. You're like, can we have someone tell us everything that's coming in C# 12? And he's probably already got the material ready to go.
Yeah.
But I don't, because I'm going to spend a bit of time on .NET 8 before the end of the year and update a bunch of workshop tutorial stuff. But I like talks that have a bit of a shelf life because it gives you the time to kind of relax into them and figure out what works and what doesn't work and where's the right balance between teaching people stuff and entertainment. And so this was a real, the JavaScript ray tracing thing was how good can I make a talk that is basically code and vector arithmetic in 3 dimensions. And I'm sort of glad that I did it, and I'm glad that I have it to draw on. And I do a half-day workshop where I literally take a bunch of people and you're like, you want to know how computer graphics actually work? We're going to build a ray tracer in a browser this afternoon. Which is great fun to do and very difficult to sell because it looks too much like fun for people's bosses to pay the bill.
Like how are they going to apply to their day jobs?
This was the one thing about when everything was online and it was all lockdowns, is there was actually a market for doing kind of goofy fun stuff in a, people like, we got a company away day, but obviously we're all at home and no one can go anywhere. We can't get together. We want to do something a little bit different. And so, I put together some material for those kinds of things. But yeah, I don't really do coding talks anymore. I do workshops, and for those, all the code goes in a GitHub repo that I publish using GitHub Pages, so people have a website where they can see all the step by step. But yeah, at that point, PowerPoint becomes the weakest link in the chain because it is, believe it or not, a terrible code editor. It really is.
It is. It is. That, which is why I think it should be the editor for BS. I think that's but no, I mean, I still submit tech talks. It's like we've got build stuff coming up next month, and I'm doing how JavaScript happened, but I also put in Open API and .NET, you're doing it wrong,
Mm.
which is a good talk, and I like it.
Yeah.
And it's sort of, there's this thing where when I talk, it's still me. And so I will just put jokes in, because if people don't know this, I used to do stand-up, and most people who know me do know that, because I tell them in the first minute of conversation. I don't, but yes, but that left me with a sort of permanent feeling in my brain where if I've been on stage talking for a minute and nobody's laughed, that means it's going really badly and I'm going to start getting heckled. So I tend to put jokes in and say funny things, and also it just covers up the fact that it's utter chaos and I haven't planned it properly or anything.
Do you think that it would be possible to get an audience to laugh at a talk which was just code and no talking?
Yes, I've definitely done that. I've written funny code. I remember, and this is way back in the mists of time, so probably 91, 92, and I was writing some code which worked with Infomix SQL database. And I was declaring, it was to do an invoice run.
Yeah.
And so I was declaring up front a bunch of cursors and preparing the statements, because I was optimizing this invoice run because it was taking 12 hours or something. And by the time I'd finished, mainly just by doing prepare cursor, it took 1 hour on the same machine, which was pretty good. But because all these cursors were up at the top and then they were being used much further down in the code, and this is in the days of wise terminals and no graphics, and so I put comments in to describe what the cursors were doing, and it was kind of like one cursor to read the sales from the sales database, one cursor to do this, and so then it ended up with one cursor to rule them all, one cursor to bind them, one cursor to bring them all and in the darkness bind them. And
that's basically how the MapReduce algorithm works, isn't it?
Yes, that
Bring
is.
them all and bind them. Yeah,
it's exactly that. And I checked it into source control, and nobody ever removed those comments because programmers are a bunch of geeks, and we like that sort of thing being in there.
Public class Muhammad Ali, float like a butterfly, string like a bee.
Exactly.
Eagle says, been thinking about creating a plugin to VS that allows you to reveal code a little at a time. I've talked to so many people who want a better way of streamlining that, and the one that there's always I've thought would work well with the way that I do it is you point it at a Git repo, and it basically, every commit to that repository creates a set of MP4 files, which are the animated edits for each file to get from that version to this version.
Yeah.
And so you can be like, right, let's see what happens to program.cs between version 12 and version 13. We're going to take this out. We're going to put this in here, add that. Let's have a look at customer.cs. This goes in here. Let's have a look at DB context. That goes in there. Okay, cool. Now we can persist customers with addresses. All right, boom. What's next?
Yes. No, that would be cool.
I'm not convinced enough.
Eagle, you should be focusing on refactoring BUnit to support .NET 8, because I was thinking about you and BUnit the other day, and so Eagle is the maintainer of BUnit, which is a unit testing solution for Blazor, and it is insanely good. You basically go, here's a component, here are the things to bind the parameters for this component, and then give me the HTML that it generates for that, and I can then do asserts against it using angle brackets and stuff.
It does.
It does. But because they've changed the way Blazor works, and now you can use Blazor components. So I'm going to start live streaming myself without Dylan on YouTube probably next week, because I have a website that I made using .NET 7, ASP.NET, Core MVC, and Razor, and I'm going to refactor it to the new kind of Blazor United, or whatever they're calling it, so that it becomes more interactive. But yes, Blazor in .NET 8, you can just go, hey, this component here, just render that to a string. which I'm guessing is doing a lot of what BUnit was sort of struggling to do in some way by pretending to be a web browser or something.
There's a .NET 8 version of Guitarioki. There is. It's in a pull request that I haven't had time to review yet, but somebody has opened a PR on the Guitarioki player and ported all that to .NET 8 and Blazor and all that kind of stuff.
Cool.
Which is one of those, like, it's, you know, the thing where when you're on one side of a particular kind of interaction, so I occasionally submit PRs to open source and no one looks at them. And I'm like, how dare you ignore my work? And then somebody submits a PR to one of my repos and I'm like, oh, I'm so busy. I'll look at that next month when I have the time. And I'm like, I'm both sides of this. Like, and at some point you're like, yeah, you know what? All I'm going to do with this is I'm going to acknowledge it and I'm going to feel bad, but it's not actually going to change my behavior. And, you know, I do. I mean, the sort of lesson, I guess, in all of this is when you submit PRs to a project, chat to the people first and see if they would be interested in your pull request. Yes. And if they don't respond to the chat, then if it's something you want, just fork it and make your own fork and use or put it somewhere else or pull it in from a component or a module or something.
There's quite a lot of the larger projects, and they just won't let you open a pull request unless it references an issue that you've already created that's been labeled by them as, no, we need to do this or need help or whatever. And then, oh, hang on. So the .NET 8 version of Guitarioki was done mainly for SMAB UK rather than you anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's going to launch his, because I think you should franchise Guitarioki.
I know. Lots of people think that, and then I explain that I don't own the copyright on any of the music that makes it work, and they go, oh yeah, that is complicated. And I say, would you like to recommend a good entertainment lawyer who will do this for snacks? And they say, and the conversation generally ends there.
Yes.
So if anyone has got a really good, entertainment licensing lawyer who will work for snacks, because it's one of those things, like for Guitarioki as a format to make enough money to pay all the qualified professionals you would need to do it legitimately in order to make money, it would have to make so much money that it wasn't remotely fun anymore.
Yes.
And, as somebody who is not a capitalist sociopath, I don't like the whole entrepreneurial, do this deal, do that deal. No, I just want to get up and play guitar and have fun.
Yes.
And
for the next one,
yes.
Can we do Back in Black by AC/DC?
Yes.
Excellent.
Deal.
Randomly.
Next one's going to be in December.
Yes, Christmas special.
The Christmas special will be and Back in Black is a Christmas song.
It is,
as we all know.
Yes.
Because Santa has returned, but down the chimney,
he's covered in soot.
Back in black. That's the festive connection there.
That's because when he comes back to the North Pole, he's all black.
He's all sooty,
Yeah. So it's about him going back and Mrs. Claus saying, "Get away from me until you've had a shower."
I'm now wondering how far we can push this joke because I'm going to look up the lyrics to it.
Because
I'm sure there's something in there about a sack. Back in Black, I hit the sack. I've been too long. I'm glad to be back. Yeah, totally
there you go. He's basically been out for, what is it? If you work it in with time zones, it's 47 hours. He has to deliver all the presents in the world.
Deliver an average-sized Lego set to every good child on the planet.
Yes.
There is
Lego set for any rich kids.
There is a very, very straightforward kind of resolution to the Santa's paradox, which is that no children are good enough.
Yes.
Yeah, and so their parents have to fake it.
Which is like heaven in The Good Place, where nobody's actually got into heaven for 2,000 years.
I remember that was such a great show.
That was so good.
Yeah, like, can we sell philosophy to a mass market?
Yeah,
and I really, really enjoyed it.
I think the final episode, the hour-long finale.
Oh, I got bored before that.
You have to go back. I mean, just at least watch the final season.
It's one of those shows, like I watched. I was talking to some folks about this, like when there's a certain personality type that when you're on a streak, you're absolutely committed to something, and if something breaks the streak, you never go back.
Yes.
We're talking like, oh, well, I did like German Duolingo for 48 days, but then on the 49th day I forgot, so now I will just never learn German.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And I had that. It was one of those shows that I was kind of watching at every opportunity. And then something else came up, like probably Obi-Wan started streaming or something. And so I switched and watched that instead, and then came back with it. And I was like, actually, nah, I'm bored now.
Yes. I remember that moment in 24. And it was halfway through season 1.
Yeah.
And because there's a thing with American TV shows, they make 24 or 26 episodes. And with 24, obviously, it was 24 episodes. But they're only actually given the budget and the go-ahead for the first half of the season to start off with. And then after the first 3 or 4 episodes have gone out and they've judged the reaction, they go, all right, make the rest of the season. So they have to, in the 13th episode, be able to wrap it up and go, and they all lived happily ever after. And so in the 13th episode of the first season of 24, everybody escapes, gets away, and it's all okay. But then they've been given the go-ahead to do the remainder of the thing. And so Kiefer Sutherland's character's wife hits her head and gets amnesia. And I just went, no, I'm out.
Yeah.
Because that was the plot of a terrible movie with Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn. And countless other, countless other terrible movies and TV shows. And I was just like, no, if that's the best you can do for a reason to carry on, then bye.
I remember Bird on a Wire as one of those rare movies that in the days of broadcast television, you'd see it in the Radio Times and go, that looks quite good. And put it on, and after half an hour, you'd be like, "I think I've seen this.
I've seen this.
Yeah,
forgettable.
Like, oh yeah." And then 2 years later, you'd be like, "Oh, that looks quite good." And then you're like, "Oh, I've definitely seen this." So it's before you could Google stuff to see if you'd seen it before.
Yes. Yeah. So we have an Origami Marie in the chat. That happens to me with craft projects. Run out of a particular material, fail to get to the craft supply store for a week. Whoops. Yes. Yeah. I have so many. I've got buttons that need putting into joysticks, like arcade quality buttons need putting into fight joysticks. And they arrived and I didn't do it straight away. And it's been 18 months and I still haven't done it. I've got Hall effect replacement joysticks for Nintendo Switch Joy-Con controllers. Which I found yesterday while I was tidying up, and I will put them in. It's really just a matter of when. But yeah, you get that thing where you kind of like, I've stopped working, and getting back into it. And actually, if you just do it for an hour, whatever it was, if you go, no, I'm going to do it, and you sit down and you do it for an hour, and then you're back in, and you're kind of like, I'm carrying on with this.
I've recently developed a new perspective on this particular problem, which is when you sort of hear somebody say, oh yeah, so like, a musician brings out a new record or someone publishes a book and they're like, yeah, well, I've been working on it for 8 or 9 years. And I was always like, wow, that's a lot of dedication. And now I'm like, no, you just kept losing interest.
Yeah.
And so now, like all the projects that I have downstairs, and this is something that you only learn as you become older. Because, when you're 22 years old, you haven't been working on anything for 8 years because the stuff you care about when you're 22 isn't the stuff you started when you were 14. But you sort of reach a point where you sort of, I don't like the word settle, but you start noticing a sort of, like almost a glacial cycle.
Yes.
So around about May, most years, I get some energy for projects again.
Yeah.
And you got to figure out when that's happening and pick up something that
I'm just
Queen of Darts.
I've been halfway through knitting a sock for a year. I really should get it finished so I can start the second one and get halfway through it and then leave it for another year. We have got an interesting range of people in the audience.
We do.
We've got sort of crafty knitting.
I know who Queen of Darts is, but I don't know if Queen of Darts wants me to say on the stream who Queen of Darts is.
Okay.
But it's somebody both of us know.
Okay. So, but we won't call it out because that's not necessarily.
As opposed to the other people on here, who half of them are people who I recognize on the internet, but if I saw them in town, Queen of Darts, Claire. Yeah.
Hello, Claire.
who is very familiar with all of my half-finished projects because
Yes.
there's boxes of them all over my living room. So,
Yes.
and
I
so the other
my
day, this is the escalation process that we go through. I got some new stickers printed, and I didn't want them to get tatty carrying them around in bags, so I made a little presentation box for the stickers out of an old box that some chocolates came in, and I made a little thing with elastic to hold them in place. And I'm like, yeah, the elastic. It really needs to be. What I need is laser cut foam. So I went online, I started looking, and then I worked out how many times would I need to get the foam cut before it would justify the cost of buying the laser cutter. Because a 40-watt CO2 laser desktop unit is about £2,500.
Yes.
But you look at it and you're like, well, and it's like, well, how much better would life be if you could laser cut things? I can hear Claire in my head saying, no, you're not having a laser cutter. So no, I'm not having it. But what I want, I kind of want someone in my neighborhood with a laser cutter because I'd like give them money to be able to use it.
If you opened a shop that just had laser cutters and 3D printers in it on the high street and said to people, just bring in your file and your material, and you can connect it up, and we've got sort of actual proper thousands of pounds quality 3D printers and CNC milling machines and stuff. I reckon
the extractor fans are the problem for laser cutters. So there is a makerspace in London, but the problem with London is that London is a city of 8 million people that takes 3.5 hours to cross.
Yes.
And so the makerspace in London, I can get to Lithuania from my house faster than I can get to the makerspace in London.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And every single person in London is as angry as you would expect somebody who lives in a relatively small city with 7,7,999,999 other
we were
people.
Chatting in Porto last week with the Australians, because the Australians are like, oh yeah, we'll drive 3 hours to go and see a friend. It's not a big deal at all. I'm like, yeah, but when you drive 3 hours in Australia, you turn right out of your driveway, and then you turn left into their driveway 3 hours later.
Yeah, you just tie the steering wheel on the way.
Do not care how many hours. What I want to know is how many traffic lights are there between you and your destination, and how many households and places of business do you have to pass? Because really, that's the bit which makes you frustrated and not want to go anywhere anymore.
Yeah.
Origami Marie has access to a laser cutter at the local high school that got interesting equipment donations back in 2016.
Interesting.
High schools.
Yes. But no, I have a 3D printer over there that doesn't work. I actually have 2 3D printers and neither of them work. One of them didn't work when it arrived. This one, I don't know if I've done something to it. It worked once.
Volunteering at a high school in exchange for access. That's an interesting idea.
That is an interesting idea.
Yeah.
I could volunteer.
Hello, I'm Dylan, and I will teach your students computering in exchange for being able to use your laser cutters.
Yes.
And lathes.
I know that there is a school near me, St. John's, which has got just because we went there when Willow was looking at sixth form. And we went to check it out, and they have this design and tech building which is huge, and it's just got the best stuff in there, like massive machines, and you're just like, yes, no, I want to play with your machines. But so yes, but so have you got any current projects that you're kind of halfway through and like?
Yes,
I mean, yeah. I mean, I've got talks that I'm writing because I always have talks I'm writing.
I have the Line Breakers backlog of songs that are something, but every Line Breakers song starts as a single joke, and if it's successful, ends up as a live performance with a backing video and a YouTube recording and everything. And it's an exponential decay pattern. So we probably have, between you and me and the rest of the group, I think we've probably got about 1,000 jokes, which probably yields around about 100 lyric snippets, which means we've got 10 finished sets of lyrics and 1 video in progress.
Yes. Well, I'm working on the video.
Something will make the cut for the next one.
Yes.
I want to get... so I'm waiting for Entity Framework 8 to come out so I can see if the thing which is currently frustrating me is fixed, because if it isn't, I'm going to submit an issue with a supporting pull request, because I want to be able to specify composite key, foreign key relationships using expressions instead of magic strings, because there is no need for magic strings in Entity Framework in 2023.
Indeed.
Yeah. I want to build a multi-track audio-video player that will multiplex video onto 2 devices, so I can do concerts where the audience can see one video and the musicians on stage can see something else.
Yeah.
So we can get guests up and give them lyrics to sing along to, and
yeah,
that kind of, because you go to the orchestra and these are like the finest musicians in the world, and they have it all written down for them. I think it's grotesquely unfair to expect rock musicians to have to remember everything, and it's not just that we can't read music, because we can't. But that's not the point, damn it.
No, that's not the point. So there are bass lines, because if you don't know, I took up bass. It was my anniversary.
It was your 1-year bass anniversary.
My 1-year bass anniversary. Because timeline, NDC Oslo was in September last year, and Don Syme, who was the original bassist for Dylan Beattie and the Line Breakers, had taken a new job at GitHub Next, doing all the research,
while still having the old
while
job as
still working for Microsoft
for
Research, and being the BDFL for F#, and he just didn't have time, and also had an issue with flying to places just to play bass, because that was the only reason you couldn't book Don for a conference unless you'd already booked Dylan and the Line Breakers. he just wouldn't do it. But so he wasn't doing it anymore, and I said, well, how hard is bass? And Dylan said, not very hard, plus it's very quiet.
I'm going to qualify that before we get hate mail.
Yes.
The bass guitar is the easiest instrument with which to make a meaningful contribution to a live band.
Yes.
Because you can simplify bass lines in a way that still works harmoniously, in a way you can't really do with guitar or keys or drums or vocals. That does not make the bass an easy instrument.
It's just not an easy instrument. What I say is
the
learning curve.
Don't send us at hate mail about how difficult the bass is.
The learning curve for bass is very flat at the start. It's quite easy. So like the first song everybody learns on bass is Seven Nation Army. And it's incredibly easy. And then there's quite a lot of like really
somewhere in a corner,
songs.
The Chain by Fleetwood Mac is weeping quietly.
Well, yes, but and then you kind of build up from there, and then you see some of the things that some people like Geddy Lee or Charles Bertold on YouTube, or people can do on bass, Jaco Pastorius and people like that.
So the NW1 Peter says, I always reckon bass guitarists look very bored when playing. That's not what it is. It's that people who naturally look boring are attracted to the bass guitar because it suits their personality.
Yes.
Mark Rendell, John Deacon from Queen. People like, they were doing that anyway before they picked up a bass. They're just like,
It was like, because it's my resting
board face.
Resting board face. Yes. Which apparently also is the most disapproving look that Glenn has ever had. My resting board face also looks like I think you're an idiot, apparently. My wife says.
Is sometimes also the case. These are not mutually exclusive.
Oh yeah, sometimes it's the case, but often I am just you're just boring me.
Resting bass face.
But yes, and so and then Dylan lent me Dave Benson's bass, and I plugged it into Rocksmith, and I kind of went, oh, I can do this. And then I think so that was October the 19th, and then we played NDC London at the end of January.
We did Yow London in October.
We did Yow, and I did 3 songs there.
Three songs live, and mimed along to the other 2 because
mimed to one
because I didn't on stage.
And then when we did NDC London, I hadn't learned the actual proper original bass lines for all the songs, but I'd learned them for some of the songs, and I'd learned simplified bass lines for the rest of them. But yes, the autism special interest thing just went click when I picked up a bass, and it's kind of like, oh god, yeah, we like this, we're doing this. And so I've practiced, I would say, at least an hour per
So people who
9
are
out of
familiar
10
with
days
this
for a
particular
year.
set of neurospicy superpowers have
Yes.
discussed on what day is Mark going to rage quit the base.
It hasn't happened yet.
I know.
It's no. I think the thing is, when because it was kind of like, if you learn bass, you can get up on the stage with Dylan and Hannes and
Yeah.
Heather and Vagif and everybody else and just have a good time. Versus, I'm going to learn a skill just for the sake of learning a skill. If it was just that, I don't know whether I would have carried on, but I've got
Yeah.
this motivation to, and also to be continually learning new songs.
Yeah.
And I'm currently trying to put together the video backing track stuff for a song that for the first time doesn't actually require you to be on the stage.
I get to have a break.
You get to have a break
Ah.
and go off. I mean, you had a break with
Smells
when
Like
we
Teen
did the Smells
Spirit.
Like Teen Spirit, and you let Alex play it.
I will quite happily sit that one out because I don't sing it, and
because you resent grunge.
Because I resent grunge for what it did to
Yes.
my beautiful, beautiful, beloved glam metalers.
Yeah, there you go.
All
Dylan
those
resents
poor people
grunge.
having to scrounge around for hairspray money for the entire 90s. You know,
Yes.
never forget.
But no, because we're doing something based on Bad Guy by Billie Eilish, which is essentially the drum track, me playing bass in drop D for some reason, and then Vagif joining in for a brief bit where there's some keyboard. The keyboard in the bridge, but that's basically it. The rest of it is. So yeah, I'm doing the video and then I'm going to record it with Willow and stick it up on YouTube, and then Heather can use that as a reference to learn it. But it's so. I mean, the video we were playing at the start of this Rebase. When you look at actually kind of watch what's going on, and there's kind of the things are dropping down from the top of the screen, but there's a slight bounce in time with the beat, and it's just was because I assume you did that in After Effects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have the one trick I use is I have an After Effects macro. After Effects has a JavaScript or ActionScript language built into it. And I have an ActionScript macro, which you give it an empty layer, you give it a null layer, and then you run the script, you tell it the beats per minute of the song, and it gives you a keyframe on every beat. And then if you shift drag things, you can snap them to keyframes, which makes it much easier to line up animation. The rest of it, you still have to literally do like movement by movement, frame by frame.
Yes.
And I'm sure it's, video post-production and things like After Effects, one of those things where I'm sure that there are people who do this all the time who know all kinds of tricks and techniques. And it's like I used to animate text by changing the text from one frame to the next. And then I discovered that there's a typewriter plugin that you can use. So you just activate the typewriter plugin and you tell it, how many words should be on screen at this point and that kind of thing. And but and the plugin landscape for these things is absolutely vast. And so many of because there are effects in there which don't have a universally accepted name, it's like going through all the 100 noises on a Casio keyboard trying to figure out what does shamisen sound like if you've never seen or heard a shamisen. And you're like, oh, that's nice.
Crystal block.
You can't just go ding, 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 ding. You got to load each plugin, and then you got to figure out, well, what shall I apply it to? Does it work on text? Does it work on video? Does it work on audio? And so I've actually, the Premiere and After Effects are the only pieces of software in living memory where I have actually read the manual, which meant I had to buy the manual and sat and read it cover to cover, and at least so I understand the conceptual model behind how they work, and what were the designers or the creators thinking about how people are going to approach video editing.
We should meet up for a beer so you can lend me the After Effects manual, because that would be helpful.
We can absolutely do that.
Let's do that.
And the thing I love is sometimes you get into arguments with people on the internet where you complain about Windows and they go, oh, you should be using Linux. And I say, well, yeah, but actually I use Adobe software to do a lot of the stuff that I do. And they're like, oh, yeah, but Adobe's closed source. And I'm like, oh, yeah, what do you recommend instead of After Effects? And they say Blender.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
That's a 3D modeling program that you've
No,
tortured in order to turn
no.
it into a video thing.
And I do use Blender, and it makes me confused.
Yes,
It's
I love this comment. I use Rebase to explain version control to non-technical people who don't understand why I think we have better tools than Google Drive.
it's. I mean, revision control. I can't remember who. I think it might have been Greg Young saying years ago, why can't lawyers learn Git? Why
Yes,
can't we do contract negotiation through pull requests that
yes,
show you what changed in what clause of what page of which contract and who asked for it and when did it happen and did it get
yeah.
in or not?
Git
And
blame. But no, I worked at a place once where the source
get
control.
blame, get commit, get convict.
Yeah. No, I worked at a place where the I won't mention the name or any of their customers, but there's a chance you've bought something from the website that they were working on, or downloaded manuals or something, and their publishing process was also their source control process. They had a Dropbox folder that you copied. It was a web site in Visual Studio, which meant it had code files in there that were Visual Basic and code files in there that were C#, and it all worked because it was just code behind in different languages. And you would copy the page you had been working on into the Dropbox folder, and then there was a process running on a compute service module in Azure that would then just copy that into the IIS directory, and it would immediately go live. And that was also their source control. So if you wanted to get the latest version, you just copied everything out of that Dropbox folder into your local working folder. And it's one of those things where we go, that's terrible, you're all a bunch of idiots, how are you even alive, and whatever. But years and years and years, this was how they worked, and it worked, and they charged the customer money, and the customer happily paid the money because they were doing a good job. It involved a lot of discipline, and it involved the kind of code review where you go over to somebody's desk and just look over their shoulder. But it worked for them, and so I'm not going to say it was wrong, although it was. Wrong. Don't do that.
I mean, I'm always interested in unconventional or unexpected applications of technology that actually turn out to work really well. And a friend of mine I was talking to years ago worked on a project where they were using SMTP as a system-to-system message transport.
Yeah.
And they just built a thing. And, you're like, really? And they're like, well, if both ends of this are locked down, so there's no access to the internet, if you control the DNS, then you need to get an XML file from this system to this system. There is no system on the planet which doesn't have a module that can send emails. And so you format your XML using whatever, Fortran, COBOL, whatever system you're stuck on. And then you connect to this SMTP server and you send an email with a certain subject line and an attachment. And if it doesn't work, you can troubleshoot it with Outlook Express.
Yes.
And that was like, now that actually sounds like a way better idea, because it's locked down in production, but the tooling that's available, and you don't think of mail clients as being a diagnostic tool, but no, hey, you want to just CC everything to your mailbox so you can see what's coming through? Easy.
Yes, that's fantastic. You can use your email client like Postman.
Yeah. And you're like, actually, maybe the SMTPH is SMTP hate, not SMTPH. Someone will go and invent that.
Yes.
Simple mail transfer protocol brackets hypertext.
Yes, and if you want to know more about simple mail transfer protocol, watch Dylan's talk, Email versus Capitalism, or Why We Can't Have Nice Things.
Come to Yash in Romania next week, because I'm doing it at Code Camp in Yash on Thursday.
Yash in
and
Romania
if you watch it on YouTube, you'll learn about email, but if you come and see it in person, you also get a sticker.
Yes.
So, there you go.
So I think we've been doing this for like 90 minutes now. We probably need to think about wrapping it up. So this was a test run to see how it went. I think it went okay.
Yeah.
There's been no dead air, which is pretty good. I'm going to edit this down and run it through Isotope RX to remove any hisses and mouth clicks and whatever, and then figure out how to publish it to podcast channels. Probably involves a website and some kind of RSS feed from the sound of it.
No, it doesn't anymore. That they don't do that. No. That's the sad thing about podcasts now, is that podcast is now a proprietary feature of Apple Music and Spotify.
Well, yes, I'm pretty sure you can.
It's no longer possible to. Well, even if you could do a podcast, none of the audio player software that people use gives two craps about your RSS feed.
Yeah.
Like, just put it on the Spotify or something.
I've got an Anchor FM. Well, it's Spotify for podcasters now. It's not called Anchor anymore. We were streaming this on Dylan's YouTube, my YouTube, and Twitch. We are going to create a joint YouTube channel somehow, however that works, and that will be where it regularly streams.
Yes.
Yes, so I think the plan, we're both at Build Stuff, which is in Vilnius in Lithuania from the 15th to the 17th of November, where I think Dylan is doing a secret closing keynote because he's not on the speaker list. My YouTube is, I think it's /Mark Rendell.
There's no secret closing keynote. I just forgot to submit a talk, and Naren pinged me last week and went, can we have a talk for Build Stuff? And I sent something, but I don't know where it's going to fit.
Okay, mystery closing keynote. But yeah, so anyway, but we're going to do a live stream, however that's going to work. I've got to buy a Zoom recorder, I think. And yeah, there you go. That's me.
So your YouTube is impossible to find.
Yes,
because when you talked about setting this up, and I don't know how you did that, because if you go onto YouTube and search for Mark Rendell, you don't find it.
No.
And if you search on, how do you have an invisible YouTube channel?
You just have to be me.
Okay.
No, you search for Mark Rendell on YouTube, you find NDC.
Yeah.
Which is
you got all your conference talks.
All my conference talks, but I don't have a lot of stuff on my YouTube channel. I'm sure if I put more stuff on my YouTube channel, then things would start to appear. And so when I start doing the stream of converting Fret Badger over to Blazor, I'm going to stream it through YouTube instead of Twitch, and then maybe my channel will start showing up a little bit more. But I'll share on Twitter next week. And yeah, all my videos were 2 years old from when I was streaming during lockdown. But yes, so we'll probably, if there's time, do one or two more of these test things. And we might do it to Twitch at the same time for people who like Twitch. And then we're going to launch it properly live in person, probably talking to random other people at Build Stuff.
And then I'm going to bugger off to Australia for 2 weeks.
And then you're going to bugger off to Australia for 2 weeks, and I'm going to see if I can get random people to just come on and talk to me. And then it's just going to carry on like that. And if I can't do one, then Dylan will find a random person. And if Dylan can't do one, I'll find a random person. But we will try and keep it up as a weekly thing.
Chat GPT into OpenAI into that thing. And we'll just get it to generate content.
Yes. So for Surly Dev says,
that was a joke. We are not going to do that. There's a special place in hell for computer-generated video content, and it's hell.
There is.
That's what hell is for. That's what hell is. So
we should. Is there an AI where you can get it to watch the video and then write a synopsis and say this is what they talked about? That would be fun.
Zoom will do that now. You can get an AI machine learning assisted summary after a meeting.
Yeah.
And I got one the other day that said, you talked about this and this and this, and no decisions were made, but it'll happen at this venue on the 22nd of October. And I was like, that sounds like a decision was made. And I definitely recall a decision being made. And
yes. Okay, so but if people prefer to watch live stuff on Twitch, then we will simulcast. StreamYard lets us stream to 3 places at the same time. So it may possibly be a shared YouTube channel, a shared Twitch channel, and maybe create a Twitter account and stream through that as well.
X, Mark, it's called X.
It's not, it's called Twitter. I'm not calling it X. But yes, so we'll do that. If anybody out there would like to sponsor this ridiculousness, then reach out to me or Dylan. Twitter's /X is probably the best place to get hold of either of us.
We are not doing this for money, but
We're not.
money. So the principle I generally have with doing fun stuff where someone might want to sponsor it is I will promise to spend the sponsorship money on fun things.
Yes.
Like, I mean, up to a point. Like, if someone wants to give us $100 billion to do this, then I'm going to use it to, pay bills and stuff. But if it's like enough to get some stickers printed to give out and pay for a stream card license so we can do high def and that kind of thing.
What what would be nice would be if somebody would, or if over a period of time people sponsored us enough money to buy in-ear monitors
and pay people on Fiverr to make videos.
And enough to pay people on Fiverr to make videos to go with songs. Yeah, that would be cool. But yes, to start off with, I would like it if I could get the $25 a month I'm spending on StreamYard to remove the StreamYard logo from the screen while we're doing it. But yeah, so but if you've got anything you think we should talk about on the podcast, then shout at us on Twitter, say talk about this. And if you have suggestions for names for the podcast or the logo or anything like that, then throw those at us as well. And we'll let you know when the next one's going to be. But the official launch will be sometime, probably the 17th of November. That's the if you're doing the closing keynote, you might be stressed that day. Might be better to do it on the 15th.
I didn't know I was doing the closing keynote. So,
well, it says mystery keynote at the end.
I don't think that's me.
But you don't have any other talks listed.
Yes.
So, but anyway, we'll figure it out. It will be sometime while we're at Build Stuff. But yeah, and if you're just like random person, you got an open source project you think is cool and you want us to take a look at it and talk about it on the show, then we can do that as well.
Surly proposes Togtat for the podcast.
Togtat. What does two old gits talk about technology? I'm not old.
No, we're not old.
No. My parents are old. Yeah. Well, one of them's old, the other one's dead. But yes, he was old. And then he was dead.
We got to save that for when we're old.
Yes.
Yeah. Don't want to peak early here.
Tig-tat, two immature gits talk about technology. But it does need to be something in that kind of vein, though. It's just something that sums up the unscripted nature of it. Derek and Clive talk tech kind of thing. So
we're going to stop now, because this is what happens when you try and have ideas while people are watching.
Yeah,
you produce bad ones very slowly.
Yes,
I have done this. It is not part of the creative process.
But no, we have 3.5 weeks to come up with a proper name for it and something resembling a logo, and a domain and all that sort of stuff. So yes. All right. Anyway, thank you very much to everybody who has come along and watched and joined in the chat. It's always nice to have chat. And yeah, we'll let you know when the next one is, and we'll see you then. Till then,
have fun.
Bye.